The Brow Pro is a slimline automatic pencil, which is double-ended. It has the pencil at one end and a spoolie on the other. You can use all of the points to draw tiny fine hair strokes, and you can shade with it as well by using the flat of the tip. So it's really versatile to use, and it comes in 6 colours. For my demonstration, I'm going to be using the medium brown colour, which is shade number 4. So I'm lucky enough that I've got quite full hairy brows, but they're not really the shape that I like them to be. So I always use brow makeup to enhance them every day. So before I start drawing my eyebrows in, I always brush them into position first. So I can use the spoolie that's on the other side of the pencil to give them a really firm brush up. My brows are quite stubborn and they grow downwards at the ends, so I have to give them a firm brush, really rolling the brush through the brows. I actually have a shape to follow, but if you don't have a shape to follow, I've got a few design tips that I can share with you. So when it comes to your brows, I would always start the bulbs of the brows just past the bridge of the nose. So follow the bridge up and outwards, and you can make a small marking either side of that. So I follow that up. Try and incorporate the hair that you've got. I'm just making a tiny mark there, either side. And then to get the tails, I would go from the edge of my nose through the last lash and then out, and that's where I'll be stopping my brow. So I can make a tiny dot there as well. You probably can't see my markings because I have got hair. This side I've got less hair. Okay, so I just make a tiny marking there, and that's where I'm going to stop the brows. Then to find the arch, I like to go anywhere between the edge of the dark part of my eye and the outer corner of the eye. So really find your highest point. So wherever your highest brow hair is, that's where you want to make that marking. So mine's around here, and I do like them to look a little bit more arched. Just going to make a tiny marking there. And the same the other side. And then for the underneath of the arch, I like mine to look higher, so I'm not going to come any lower than my hair is. So around, I don't really need to mark this one, but around there is where I'm going to pop my arch. This side is actually different. So I've made a few markings, and that's good to do if you don't have a lot of hair, because then you can kind of get some symmetry to your brows. So just a little brush again, and then I'm going to start filling my brows in. The first thing I do is to actually identify all the empty areas. So I've got some gaps here. There's an obvious gap there because I want to lift the brows, and then to follow that along, it's a little bit empty there. And then it's just slightly empty at the fronts as well. And my trick is to rest your chin on the palm of your hand. That just kind of steadies yourself. Okay, so just getting a tiny bit of colour into those gaps, not a lot, just so that the brow starts to look a little bit more even. So this is the mistake people make most of the time. They just start to colour in the whole brow, but really when you're penciling your brows, just add the colour where you need it. So now I've filled in the gaps there, I'm going to then start to design the front of the brow. I'm going to draw in some hair strokes. So I'm going to use the finest corner of the pencil, and I'm going to balance my chin on my hand, and I'm going to draw some strokes. I can't really talk at the same time as doing it. And what I'm doing is I'm drawing a stroke, I'm leaving a gap. I'm drawing a stroke and leaving a gap. Okay, so you can see there, I've just started to fill that out in that area there. I like mine to look quite straight up, but you can tilt them over as well. It doesn't have to be so square at the front, but because my eyebrows grow that way, I feel it's more natural. And I'm just going to start to follow those strokes through. Not all the way through the brows, just into those gappy areas. And I've got an imaginary line that I'm following under here. So I'm not drawing a line across the bottom. I don't really like that look when you can see obvious lines. So I'm just doing my hair strokes, but imagining that I've got like a barrier at the bottom that I won't go below. What happens with the side of the pencil is once I've used one side, it's then going to sharpen the tip. And then once I go to the other side, the pencil just starts getting slimmer and slimmer. So the more you use it, the better and easier it becomes to use. I don't really like a big line around mine, so I'm trying to stop my strokes at like an invisible barrier line that I've got at the top there. Just going to strengthen any that look a little bit weaker. I can actually get away with having blurred strokes here because I've got the hair to create the texture. But if you haven't, then it's really important that you kind of leave a gap between each stroke to get that textured look. Okay, and then I sit back and I have a look, and then I just want to see if there are any obvious gaps in the brows. I can just see a few. Okay, and that's about as much as I would pencil into that brow. I like my brows to look very fluffy and soft, but I do like definition as well. I'm not really a big fan of the overly defined brow, but I like to have like a nice frame to the face, but I don't want my brows to walk in the room before I do. This is the harder part, so you need to balance up to the other side. So by me making those markings at the beginning just gives me a little template to follow. So I had a mark for the front of the brow, the end, and the upper and lower arch. So now again, going to fill in all the gaps first. I've got obvious gaps here and there. This area here is where I plucked my brows years and years ago, wanting higher arches, and then they just didn't grow back very well. Okay, so all the gaps first that look a little bit empty, and just do a little bit and then check it against the other brow, just to make sure you're not creating two different styles completely. Okay, so that's all my gaps filled in, and now I'm going to go to the front. Remember, I've got my invisible line at the bottom, so I'm not going to draw a line in. I'm going to start all my hair strokes at that point. So using the very corner, the finest corner of the pencil, resting my chin on my hand, starting at the marking that was there. And you just need a really light hand for this. And it's practice really. So start lighter, you can always go over them again. And remember to leave quite big gaps between them. Otherwise you just end up with a really blurred eyebrow. Just following those strokes along. So the front of this one looks a little bit emptier, so I'm just going to go back in and repeat that. And I think that looks quite even now. And I'm not looking to do such fine hair strokes here. I'm really just looking to fill in the gaps, but without shading the brows in completely. You can shade the brows if you like a more defined look. Sometimes when I'm out, if I'm going out for an evening, I'll shade this whole area here and just do hair strokes at the front. And just brush them in between, because sometimes you can be penciling away and you don't need to put a lot on. And what brushing them will do is just diffuse if you've got any little like dots of extra pencil that you don't need. And then I sit back and I have a look to see if they look symmetrical, if there are any obvious areas of pencil, which there is a little bit there. So it's just important that I kind of keep them brushed up and into place. And that's how you use the EyebrowQueen Pro Pencil.